The latest WikiLeaks cables depict Russia as a mafia state where corruption is rampant and criminals are protected by the police. The cables also contain accusations that Russia's Prime Minister Vladimir Putin has amassed a fortune through illicit proceeds and hides the wealth overseas. But as the revelations continue, so too does the backlash against WikiLeaks. And tonight, Sweden's highest court has refused permission to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to appeal against an arrest order issued over alleged sexual crimes. Peter Lloyd reports.
What kind of Russia does Vladimir Putin preside over? A Spanish mafia-busting judge, Jose Gonzalez, quoted in a US diplomatic cable, paints a picture of astonishing corruption. The judge claims that Russia has become a virtual mafia state, so that one can't differentiate between the activities of the government and organised crime groups. And the strategy is to use OC, or organised crime groups, to do whatever the government of Russia can't acceptably do as a government. The judge describes as accurate the thesis of the poisoned spy Alexander Litvinenko of links between Russian intelligence and the mafia. It's all slander, said Prime Minister Putin during a CNN Larry King interview, where he suggested there was an anti-Russian conspiracy afoot.
Some experts believe that somebody is deceiving WikiLeaks, their reputation being undermined, to use them for their own political purposes later on. That's one of the possibilities there, and that's the opinion of the experts.
The WikiLeaks founder is coming under increasing pressure. Amazon has stopped hosting the WikiLeaks website on its US servers, and reports say he remains in the UK, where police are awaiting instructions before arresting him on behalf of Swedish prosecutors investigating his alleged rape of a woman in August.
Julian has nothing to hide. His main interest is to vindicate his name.
Julian Assange spoke to Time magazine from an undisclosed location. He dismissed Hillary Clinton's claim that he's putting lives at risk, saying she should quit over leaked cables showing US diplomats spied on foreign diplomats at the United Nations.
She should resign if it can be shown that she was responsible for ordering US diplomatic figures to engage in espionage activities at the United Nations.
At the State Department, they're calling Assange an anarchist.
He is calling for the Secretary to step down at a time where he is trying to evade an active warrant by Interpol. The Secretary of State, by contrast, is in Kazakhstan, engaged directly with global leaders, working to solve the world's challenges.
Here, the federal police are still trying to work out if any Australian laws have been broken by the Australian-born whistleblower.
I have been receiving briefings, and we have a whole process to go through, all of this information. I mean, millions of pieces of information, and assess the implications for us. So we'll work through that. And I absolutely condemn the placement of this information on the WikiLeaks website. It's a grossly irresponsible thing to do and an illegal thing to do.
The White House has set up a special panel to assess the damage and find new ways to protect America's secrets. Peter Lloyd, Late Line.
St. Petersburg, 6 a.m. We have an appointment to meet Andrei Zykov. A former city police officer, now retired, who made combating corruption his main cause. We'll be going with him to look for what is supposedly the most recent luxury residence of the Russian president and his close friends.
Спасибо. Залив.
We're heading north towards the Finnish border. The villa is said to be hidden here on an isolated peninsula in the forests along the coastline. After driving for 3 hours, we seem to be approaching our goal. There's a series of luxury houses hidden from curious eyes behind their high fences and walls. According to our information, the Russian president's villa is in the village of Lodochny, but strangely enough, no one seems to be able to show us the way.
Здравствуйте. Вы знаете, Лодочный далеко еще? Не знаете? Окей.
Место-то хорошее. Чем труднее, тем лучше, вообще-то. Чем безлюднее, вернее. Кому же хочется селиться среди людей, а здесь вот такие места.
We'd been driving around for a few hours when someone gave us some directions.
Мы ищем это в сторону Выборга. Там указатель будет Зимино. Километров 30. Асфальт. Окей, хорошо. Спасибо.
At last, we find the driveway. It's already dark.
Вот здесь дорога хорошая. Вот здесь ближе. Красивые места. Даже то, что мы вот видим. Вот в таких местах может президент остановиться, может сделать для себя базу. Забор такой, что там нет. Ну и все закрыто, да. Ну вот похоже, вот это вот похоже.
The access is firmly shut. We can't go any further. What is hiding behind this fence and these trees is this. A huge residential complex that the Russian opposition managed to film with a drone. Caretaker's house, 3,000 square meters. Heliport. Guests' quarters, 1,500 square meters. And in the best spot, well hidden, the house belonging to the lord of the estate, 745 square meters, and 1,500 square meters of leisure area. It's appointed in the manner you would expect from a president. A huge indoor swimming pool. A luxurious reception room with billiard table. And for when he works, this office watched over by the Russian symbol of power, the two-headed eagle. In total, over 48 hectares that now seem to be reserved for the sole use of the ruler of Russia. Since his rise to the top of the Kremlin on January the 1st, 2000, Vladimir Putin has vastly increased his outward signs of wealth.
Hurrah!
Like the dozens of luxury watches he collects, some of them worth as much as 400,000 euros. Then there's the yacht he is said to own, worth over 25 million euros, and the huge palace estimated at 1 billion euros. How does the Russian president, who earns 150,000 euros a year and has only ever had a career in the Russian public service, manage to afford such a lifestyle?
He has spent the last 17 years of his life accumulated huge amounts of money. I guess that Putin is worth $200 billion.
Could he have acquired this fortune through corruption?
When you look around Putin's entourage, the money that these people make, you cannot obtain this type of volumes of money from honest work and investment. That's impossible.
How far is the Russian president prepared to go to stay in power and protect his interests?
Сашина информированность, конечно, она была малоприятна Путину. И молчать. Видимо, Путин это понял.
Investigation into the heart of the Tsar system. It all started in St. Petersburg, Russia's second largest city. It was here that Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was born in 1952 into a working-class family. At the age of 18, he entered the Russian Secret Service, then called the KGB. It became his career. 2 decades later, in 1991, the Soviet system collapsed. The mayor of St. Petersburg proposed that he become his deputy. Vladimir Putin left the KGB and apparently improved the existing system of corruption. In Bavaria, southern Germany, lived a man who knew this system well, Franz Sedlmayr. In the early 1990s, he set up a security company in St. Petersburg to train the local police force and supply it with equipment. A contract signed under the patronage of Vladimir Putin. Very soon, members of the police force tried to expropriate him.
The guy came in and said, well, this is 6 months after we started work, and basically said he has some changes in mind. He would like to exchange management personnel and replace my people with his people. And since I was the president of the company, I said, you know, it's not your job. You're a partner, but I run the affairs and I decide who will work here and not.
How do you explain that the police department wanted to expropriate?
Obviously, we had a running, operating company that they wanted to have.
Franz Sedlmayr therefore made an appointment to see the deputy mayor of the city, Vladimir Putin.
And so I went in to see Mr. Putin, and Mr. Putin's reaction was interesting because as far as he was concerned, it was not his problem or the city's problem. And his reaction was that he doesn't want to interfere into a dispute between parties involved in a business. I said, fine. And said, why is that? And he said very, very clearly, he said he has enough work to do to protect the mayor's interests vis-a-vis the state organs, which I couldn't do much with at the time. But I basically understood that there's some other relationships at work here which hinder normal development. Let me put it this way.
According to Franz Sedlmayr, here on the right, Vladimir Putin hinted at a few measures that would enable him to maintain ownership of his company.
We had to develop our contacts in politics further in order to be able to survive in this market in Leningrad. And after we placed our investment and doing that, I needed to cultivate my relationship with Vladimir Putin.
So how did you cultivate it?
Well, basically, I made clear to him that we are not the enemy of the city. We are friends. And we're also ready to contribute to the city's budget, which we have done. And also, he and I decided that we're going to sponsor a SWAT team for the Goodwill Games that was coming up in the year 1994. And we invested more than $1 million in donations to the city of St. Petersburg.
Despite his cooperation, Franz Sedlmayr was eventually expropriated and had to leave Russia. Since then, he has been involved in a lawsuit with the Russian government to obtain compensation. But Vladimir Putin was not just supposedly squeezing money from companies. The system of corruption he is said to have set in place in St. Petersburg was also developed to the detriment of the population. In 1991, St. Petersburg, still under shock from the fall of the Berlin Wall, is starving to death. Vladimir Putin was then put in charge of supplying food to the city. To fill the shops, an exchange system was set up with foreign countries. Raw materials like oil or wood in exchange for food. The problem was that the raw materials left the country, but the food did not come in. Andrei Korchagin is a former official from St. Petersburg. We met him in London, where he obtained political refugee status. In 1991, opposition MPs, after being warned about these issues, set up a parliamentary investigation commission. And they discovered a fraud scheme. The raw materials had not been exchanged, but sold. The MPs sought to find out who profited from the scheme.
Это, я так понимаю, копии тех материалов, которые были в распоряжении комиссии Марины Салье, когда в рамках деятельности Ленсовета они расследовали, пытались, вернее, расследовать вот те махинации, которые производились с представленной комиссией. Там очевидно, что фрод, по большому счету, в результате которого кто-то очень сильно обогатился. И Путина обвинили в том, что он занимается незаконными махинациями с огромными бюджетными деньгами. Там ведь речь шла о сотнях миллионах долларов. Тогда это были огромные деньги.
The commission estimated the amount of the fraud at some $900 million. Its conclusions were categorical.
The comparative analysis of prices indicated in the agreement testifies to the criminal nature of the terms of this agreement. Vladimir Putin refuses to present a whole series of documents with the intention of hiding the truth of the situation.
What was Vladimir Putin's real involvement in this fraud? Did he organize it? A document enclosed in the MP's investigation proves that Vladimir Putin was directly involved. It was this export license for wood which he signed himself, although he was neither entitled nor empowered to do so.
Мы видим, что утверждал подобную сделку товарищ Путин. Вот здесь его подпись и имя написано. Тем не менее, это было, и Путин присвоил себе это полномочия и активно пользовался. И уж, поверьте, тоже извлекал из этого личную выгоду, потому что в те времена получить подпись такого высокого лица на какой-нибудь бумажке бесплатно было невозможно. И вот в таких случаях, как правило, деньги носили как раз, как вы правильно заметили, в конвертах или в чемоданах. Потому что за такого вида услуги расплачивались в основном кэшем.
The parliamentary investigation was sent to Moscow. The administration acknowledged receipt and officially requested that Vladimir Putin be removed.
He must be dismissed from his office and no longer be appointed to public duty.
This recommendation was not followed. Vladimir Putin remained deputy mayor of St. Petersburg.
Совершить такое преступление возможно только при поддержке на самом верху государственных органов. И люди, которые пошли на это, в том числе товарищ Путин, они понимали, что есть поддержка, и все эти дела будут замяты.
The affair was brought to justice, then hushed up. But it aroused the suspicions of the local police. In the early 1990s, Andrei Zykov was an inspector in the fraud squad in St. Petersburg. With 3 of his colleagues, he began to make discreet investigations into Vladimir Putin.
Это самоудостоверение. Старший следователь по особо важным делам. Отдел расследования преступлений в сфере коррупции и экономики.
The police officers had the support of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs, which granted them a special status.
А вот это, когда мы расследовали уголовное дело вот по Путину, чтобы не было никаких вопросов, если бы мы просто сказали, что ведем это дело в отношении Путина, нас бы, мягко говоря, этой команды бы не было в течение 24 часов.
After 8 years on the case, the investigators accused Vladimir Putin of setting in place a criminal system.
Ну, что мы нашли? То, что преступное сообщество мы нашли. Что практически вся мэрия Санкт-Петербурга – это не что иное, как преступное сообщество, особенно возглавляемое Владимиром Владимировичем, ну, тоже нашли. То, что у них была фирма, через которую происходили, так сказать, ну, получение взяток. Тогда вовлекать в преступную деятельность разных лиц. Ну, руководители ГУВД, руководители прокуратуры, судьи.
In 1999, Andrei Zykov was dismissed from the St. Petersburg police. The investigation was hushed up. The police officers had also discovered that to establish his hold on the city and to amass a fortune, Vladimir Putin had also probably collaborated with the mafia. In the St. Petersburg of the 1990s, the head of the mafia was Gennady Petrov. Anyone who wanted to do business in this city had to go through him, because it seems he had a master trump. He is believed to have worked hand in glove with the deputy mayor Vladimir Putin. This is what the former Yakuza, Kenichi Kamias, is going to tell us. We're meeting him in Sweden. For the first time, this member of the Japanese organized crime network, who has turned from his ways, has agreed to talk about his Russian past. At that time, he was working in the St. Petersburg casino milieu.
October 1992.
Among his Russian associates were Gennady Petrov, the head of the local mafia, and his assistant, Sergei Kuzmin.
This is Kenichi, Sergei, and Gena. I see that direct, they are not normal people. I mean, they have their own hotel, like a military. It's a machine gun in the shoulder and security in the hotel. And they pick me up themselves to the airport. And sometimes he coming, Kenichi, I come by bus. Oh, I ask why you have a bus? You know, it's I control a bus also, he told me.
Gennady Petrov seemed to control numerous businesses at the time.
What did they say about the relationship with the authorities?
What I understand, they control, so they can get any permission as well. So.
The head of the mafia explained to Kenichi Kamias that allegedly the real boss was in fact the deputy mayor of the city, Vladimir Putin. He was the one who authorized the casino openings.
They explained to me, and the translator told me this comes from Putin. Yeah, I was surprised why he controlled casino business. Maybe he wanted the business, maybe.
And Kenichi Kamias understood that there may have been more than business relations between Vladimir Putin and Gennady Petrov.
What I understand is they told me they are friends.
So they were a friend of Putin?
Yeah, he told me.
We are now in 1992. Vladimir Putin, formerly of the KGB, protege of the mayor, reigns supreme over St. Petersburg. In 1996, President Boris Yeltsin asked him to join him in Moscow. Vladimir Putin soon became a key man in the Kremlin. And 2 years later, he was appointed director of the FSB, the new name of the KGB. His role was to protect Boris Yeltsin and his family, publicly accused of corruption.
Для меня возвращение на работу в органы безопасности – это возвращение в свой родной дом.
On the 31st of December 1999, Boris Yeltsin decided to resign. He appointed Vladimir Putin acting president.
Дорогие россияне, дорогие соотечественники, сегодня на меня возложена обязанность главы государства.
The same day, the new boss of the Kremlin signed his first decree: total immunity for Boris Yeltsin and his family.
The outgoing president shall not be subjected to any administrative or judicial inquiry. He may not be detained nor arrested. Signed by Vladimir Putin.
The reign of Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin had just begun. Has he used this to maintain his relations and continue to do business? Officially, Vladimir Putin, as president, is a figurehead of the fight against corruption.
Обсудим вопросы совершенствования антикоррупционной системы. Антикоррупционное законодательство и практика его применения отвечают мировым стандартам.
But according to Sergei Kolesnikov, it is only a front. In 2010, this Russian businessman was suddenly forced to leave Russia.
Господин Шамалов принял решение подбросить мне килограмм наркотиков в машину и дальше, так сказать, организовать посадку в тюрьму.
Отъезд из России очень быстро, как это было?
Все было очень просто. Я взял портфель, сел на самолет и улетел.
Since then, he regularly changes countries to give his meetings. This time, he was in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania. He feels safe here. In his hotel room, he plays a recording of a meeting with his associates for us, one of his last. It was in St. Petersburg in 2009. At the time, he managed a thriving medical equipment company.
Мы проводили совещание, нас было трое, Горелов, Шамалов и я, и мы подводили финансовые итоги.
According to Sergei Kolesnikov, the company had a hidden shareholder, Vladimir Putin, thanks to whom the flourishing company is said to have won numerous public contracts, with, on top of everything, considerable profits claimed by someone named Mikhail Ivanovich.
Деньги Михаила Ивановича 439 968. Вот это деньги Михаила Ивановича.
Кто это
Михаил Иванович, у нас этот никнейм принадлежал Владимиру Путину.
Почему никнейм для него?
чтобы не называть известные имена и фамилии, и мы были бы свободны в этой ситуации обсуждать какие-то темы, не привлекая чужого внимания.
On that day, Sergei Kolesnikov's associates are believed to have officially paid the entire profit, more than 430 million euros, to their hidden shareholder, Vladimir Putin. The payment was illegal. Vladimir Putin's public office prevented him from receiving money from a private company. According to Sergei Kolesnikov, Vladimir Putin used the money to build his gigantic palace on the edge of the Black Sea. Its total value, almost 1 billion euros. These sums of money are way beyond Vladimir Putin's modest lifestyle, if we are to believe his last official declaration of property. The Russian president declares only a 1,500 square meter piece of land, a 77 square meter apartment, a small garage, 2 old Soviet cars, and a larder plus trailer. Sergei Kolesnikov has already accused Vladimir Putin several times in public of unlawful enrichment. No case has ever been brought against him. Vladimir Putin, as president, is believed to have maintained his former practices. What about his former relations? Particularly with Gennady Petrov, head of the St. Petersburg Mafia. On the 14th of June, 2008, he and his close associates were arrested in Spain. The police came for him at this huge villa that he had constructed with breathtaking views of the sea. Pablo Muñoz is a Spanish investigative journalist. He covered this arrest.
Sin ninguna duda, varios millones de euros. Lo es por la construcción, que es una construcción magnífica. Lo es por los metros de la finca, que son muchos metros cuadrados. Por el emplazamiento, que es sensacional, es inigualable. Es la vivienda de un caudillo, del número 1.
Gennady Petrov's power is put on display on the street side of the house.
Es una casa muy al estilo de Rusia. Estas columnas, este tipo de construcción es muy al estilo de un magnate ruso, de una persona con muchísimo dinero que quiere además demostrar que tiene mucho dinero. Es una de las cosas. No es solo tenerlo, sino además que se sepa que lo tengo.
Living a luxury lifestyle, but no income declared. In 2007, the Spanish justice system started to take an interest in the mafia boss. They wiretapped him and began surveillance. Operation Troika was launched.
Que mirar, en ese árbol, allí se colocaron pequeñas jaulas para pájaros, pequeñas jaulas, pero que en este caso no contenían pájaros, no eran para pájaros. Por dentro había una cámara de seguridad, lo bautizaron, era el nido del cuco. Permitía grabar todo lo que eran las entradas y salidas de Petrov y del resto de la familia, y Petrov nunca supo que estaba siendo investigado.
Among the prosecutors who initiated the investigation, José Grinda. In the phone tapping that he had ordered, stupefied, he discovered the extent of the links between the Russian mafia and Vladimir Putin's government. He agreed to speak about it for the first time in front of a camera.
El señor Petrov con determinados políticos o con determinados funcionarios. Luego hay conversaciones en las que hablan efectivamente de intereses del señor Petrov en Rusia y hablan de una manera que nosotros hemos interpretado, la Fiscalía Española, hemos interpretado que era no en tono amistoso, sino era en tono de obtener resultados de la influencia de esas personas públicas, lo que llamaba el tráfico de influencias.
Influence peddling that took place in particular between the mafia boss Gennady Petrov and Tolik, otherwise known as Anatoly Serdyukov, Putin's Minister of Defense.
Además era una relación personal, o sea, no son relaciones en las que el señor Serdyukov y el señor Petrov parezca que no se conocen. No, no, era un conocimiento de amistad. Lo que sí que teníamos era, lo que se percibía, era que el señor Petrov tenía una relación de superioridad jerárquica respecto del señor Serdyukov. O, vamos a quitar jerárquico, pero de superioridad. Es decir, el señor Serdyukov estaba por abajo del señor Petrov en cuanto al trato, en cuanto a las conversaciones, en cuanto a la forma de hablar.
So, there are links between the mafia boss Gennady Petrov and a minister close to Vladimir Putin. But he could also show up in person, in the recorded conversations. Thanks to a nickname that comes up regularly in the recordings, Number One. Like in the discussion between Gennady Petrov and his son Anton, where Number One seems to have his hand in all types of business.
November 26, 2007, 9:06 in the morning. Anton calls his father Gennady. Gennady Petrov explains to him that he saw Number One. Number One is ready to help regarding the sales contract on the aircraft, but also on the land and the electricity business.
When we ask him who is behind this nickname, the prosecutor dodges the issue.
Quelles circonstances est-il prononcé et qui évoque-t-il?
No lo sé. Las conversaciones yo no las recuerdo. Hay una gran parte que no recuerdo.
But he was anxious to show us this handwritten document.
Creo que era en el domicilio profesional del señor Untoria, que era abogado del señor Petrov, que también está acusado. Aquí hablan del señor, podría ser Putin, de terrenos en Málaga, población rusa, terrenos no comprados. No sabemos a qué se refiere, no tenemos ni puñetera idea.
According to our information, the investigators were convinced that it is indeed Vladimir Putin who is hidden behind the nickname Number One, used by Gennady Petrov. Released by Spain while awaiting trial, the mafia boss is living peacefully in Russia today, protected by the Russian government who refuses to extradite him. Others witnessed this influence peddling at the highest levels. Vladimir Milov was Deputy Minister of Economic Development for Vladimir Putin from 2000 to 2002. According to him, under influence from the Kremlin, Russia was transformed into a kleptocracy.
Is established total control of major assets and cash flows in major industries, oil, gas, electricity, refining sector. This is the empire that's totally controlled by just a handful of people, which originate from his inner circle. And also a lot of these people were rumored to be connected with organized crime groups, at least back in St. Petersburg. You know, to me, this is an organized crime in itself, because it is a criminal thing for bureaucrats to be able to control cash flows, which, I mean, they get like everything possible from state contracts, financing from Gazprom. They even invent specific, totally unnecessary projects.
Is Putin a godfather?
Absolutely. He totally controls everything personally.
And so, since Vladimir Putin has been in power, his closest friends, called the St. Petersburg clan, may have been rewarded. Like his legal advisor at the St. Petersburg mayor's office, Dmitry Medvedev, who became prime minister and even president of Russia for a few years. Or his secretary at the mayor's office, who became head of Rosneft, the largest Russian oil company. There are also the Rottenberg brothers, Arkady and Boris, friends from St. Petersburg who benefited from many state contracts and who are today billionaires. This old friend who became president of Rossiya, the bank of the elites. When another, Nikolai Shamalov, a former colleague from the KGB, became the main stakeholder. When his son, Kirill Shamalov, was made the youngest billionaire in Russia by being fast-tracked to the position of majority shareholder in the Russian oil company Sibur, just after his marriage with Ekaterina, Vladimir Putin's eldest daughter. A billionaire son-in-law who could serve as frontman for Vladimir Putin to conceal part of his wealth. Remember the luxury home on the coast of the Gulf of Finland, guarded 24/7 by the Russian Secret Service, purported to be occupied solely by Vladimir Putin? But officially, the owner of the estate is Sibur, the company held by Kirill Shamalov, an accommodating son-in-law that we find behind other luxury real estate property that, in reality, could belong to the Russian president. Biarritz, in the south of France. Situated above the Chambord-de-Mour beach, perched on a cliff. One of the most beautiful villas on the coast, measuring 300 square meters. With 2,000 square meters of land, it's estimated to be worth around 4 million euros. Pierre Hafner is an anti-corruption activist. He has taken an interest in this house since it was sold to Russians about 10 years ago.
La terrasse là, d'après les voisins, a été faite lorsqu'ils sont arrivés. Et comme vous voyez, il y a un mât métallique et c'est une grande voile qui se déploie. C'est pour qu'ils puissent se bronzer sans être vus par les voisins. Il y a les buissons, des arbres et ensuite les palmiers. Donc c'est les gens qui cherchent à se protéger.
An owner who hides from his neighbor's view and who conceals his identity.
Il n'y a pas de nom sur la boîte aux lettres et il n'y a pas de numéro. Également ici, il n'y a rien d'inscrit. Les volets sont fermés. La villa n'est pas habitée pour le moment.
To discover the owner's identity, he led an investigation.
J'ai rencontré des artisans qui sont venus travailler ici. L'homme, il m'a dit, mais j'ai travaillé pour Poutine ici. Et il m'a dit, ils m'ont payé tout en liquide. Et vous ne trouverez rien sous le nom de Vladimir Poutine.
Nothing under Vladimir Putin's name. But on the documents supplied by the French government, the owner of this villa is Kirill Shamalov, the Russian president's son-in-law. But the person on whom Vladimir Putin is relying on the most is a longtime friend.
Panama Papers.
Panama Papers.
In April 2016, the biggest financial scandal of the last few years broke out. The Panama Papers. More than 11 million confidential documents from the Mossack Fonseca law firm in Panama. They are all about the same thing, the creation of offshore accounts in tax havens, with a goal to launder money from tax evasion or corruption. In the dock, Sergei Roldugin, one of the most famous Russian musicians, but also the godfather of Vladimir Putin's second daughter and his best friend since childhood. His signature is present on documents that allowed more than $2 billion to be hidden in Panama. Is it his personal fortune, or would he have agreed to conceal money for Vladimir Putin, his childhood friend? In St. Petersburg, Sergei Roldugin comes to play regularly at the Philharmonic. The man is known for his modesty. Ilya Cherkasov is director of the orchestra. For him, the musician looks nothing like a wealthy man.
По-моему, человек более чем спокойно к ним относящийся. И человек, который, ну, скажем так, ведет себя не так, как, и живет не так, как обладатель $2 миллиардов, да? И когда он приезжает в филармонию, иногда мне звонит, поскольку он сам за рулем, и говорит, что если есть здесь место свободное, то чтобы для него его поберегли. Миллиардеры иначе подъезжают.
But on the other hand, he can testify to the friendship between Sergei Roldugin and Vladimir Putin.
Не был, а и остается другом Владимира Владимировича. Вместе я их видел один раз, года 4 назад. Был юбилей художественного руководителя филармонии господина Семерканова. И они оба были гостями на этом юбилее. Я их видел вместе. В общем, да, их отношения, по всей видимости, довольно близкие.
So, could the Russian president's friendship with the musician have served as a front and thus used to hide his personal fortune? We attempted to reach Sergei Roldugin.
Добрый вечер. Здравствуйте. Французское телевидение вас беспокоит. Меня зовут Никола Тонев. Можно ли говорить с Сергеем Павловичем Ролдугином, пожалуйста?
This is the response systematically given to foreign journalists. But in front of Russian journalists, on the primary national television station, the musician tried to explain himself. His explanation for $2 billion, education-related gifts from donors.
Музыкальное образование, оно очень дорогое, индивидуальное. Раскручивание этого никто не скрывает, стоит больших денег. И я просил этих денег, наверное, надоел я уже своим знакомым, потому что они сказали: слушай, ну вот есть возможность поучаствовать в проектах, и получилось неплохо.
And to hear him, he doesn't have any problem justifying the use of the funds.
О своих деньгах я могу сказать, понятно, куда уходит. И я предъявляю и могу предъявить. Вот инструмент один, вот инструмент другой. Вот 4 инструмента сейчас рояля я отправляю в молодежный образовательный центр в Сочи.
The Russian investigative journalists who worked on the Panama Papers do not believe this version of the facts. In Moscow, at the headquarters of Novaya Gazeta, one of the last independent Russian newspapers, we join Roman Shlenov. For him, the musical explanation sounds off-key.
Но в реальности это оправдание звучит несерьезно, потому что $2 миллиарда не выглядит как просто, значит, плата за некие музыкальные инструменты, которые Ролдугин возил. Слишком много музыкальных инструментов потребовалось бы ввести. Так скажем, можно было всю страну завалить музыкальными инструментами.
And he only sees one possible beneficiary.
Соответственно, вопросы возникают. Вот эти средства, они в реальности контролируются кем? А кому тогда нужен Ролдугин, чтобы не показывать, значит, что средства принадлежат непосредственно ему? Ну, первая мысль, которая возникала всегда, это вот российскому президенту. Единственное, что доказать это крайне сложно, потому что вы же понимаете, что он бывший сотрудник спецслужб, да, ему незачем фигурировать, да и любой умный российский чиновник никогда не оставит никакой подписи ни под одной бумагой. У него есть для этого доверенные лица, друзья, родственники, кто угодно, ближние, дальние.
One question still remains.
Зачем Путину такая схема и столько денег?
Возможно. Я не знаю, зачем человек хочет контролировать те или иные денежные ресурсы. Мы не знаем, для чего они предназначались в финале, как они используются там людьми из окружения президента.
We asked Vladimir Putin this question, along with about 30 others.
Are you the ultimate beneficiary of the money from the Panama Papers? Did you ask Mr. Roldugan to sign these documents for you? What was the money for?
No answer. So we have to settle for the version given by Vladimir Putin in April 2016 on Russia Today, the pro-government channel. According to the Russian president, Sergei Roldugin is an honest man, just like him.
Чем больше у нас будет таких людей, тем лучше. И я горжусь, что у меня есть такие друзья. И вот это продвигается. Вот есть какой-то там друг господина президента России, вот он чего-то там сделал, наверное, это имеет какую-то коррупционную составляющую. Какую? Да никакой там нет.
Nothing to hide then. And yet, for several years now, whenever a person starts to show proof of corruption by Vladimir Putin, or the government, or the oligarchs, the Kremlin wouldn't hesitate to threaten them, and even liquidate them. Death threats.
Can I ask everybody to sit down?
The businessman, William Browder, lives with them at all times.
Good evening, everybody.
That night in London, he was organizing a ceremony in homage to Sergei Magnitsky.
Magnitsky Awards dinner. Sergei Magnitsky was my lawyer, and his crime was exposing corruption of the Putin regime. When I got the news of his murder on the 17th of November 2009 in the morning, it broke my heart. and it changed my life.
In 2009, after 2 years of investigation, Sergei Magnitsky had just proven that high-ranking Russian officials stole $250 million through illegal expropriation of his boss, William Browder. He informed the Russian justice system of his discovery. The response was immediate. He was arrested for tax evasion and imprisoned.
They arrested him. They put him in pretrial detention, where he was then tortured to get him to withdraw his testimony against these government officials. They put him in cells with no heat and no window panes in December in Moscow, so he nearly froze to death. Turns out that he was much tougher than they anticipated, and he refused to perjure himself, he refused to bear false witness, and he didn't sign their false confession. And 8 riot guards with rubber batons beat Sergei Magnitsky that night until he died. He was 37 years old. He left a wife and 2 children.
To understand why his lawyer made the Russian authorities so uncomfortable, William Browder launched an investigation with one goal: to find the $250 million that was stolen using expropriation. After 7 years, the circuit that the money followed can be traced through dozens of offshore vehicles, right up to one of its supposed beneficiaries, Sergei Roldugin, Vladimir Putin's childhood friend.
The flow of money Sergei Magnitsky discovered and was killed over, the money flowing through Russian banks, through Moldovan banks, and eventually flowing to the accounts of Sergei Roldugin. This is the famous cellist from the Panama Papers who is Putin's best friend from childhood, Putin's nominee. The moral of the Magnitsky story is, if you have something that the authorities want to steal, they will steal it. And the more valuable it is, the more of an incentive there is to steal it. And if you do anything to stand in their way, there's nothing that will stop them from killing you or killing your people, and doing so in the most sadistic way possible.
Determined to avenge his lawyer, William Browder attacked Vladimir Putin head-on. In December 2012, he managed to get the Magnitsky Act adopted by the United States. This law allows the ill-gotten gains of Russian officials to be frozen abroad.
The Magnitsky Act basically ruins his whole business model. If all of a sudden all this hard work of 17 years of committing crimes and all that money gets frozen in the West, then it wasn't worthwhile in the first place. And so it touches him in the most existential way.
The consequence for William Browder: he himself became the Kremlin's #1 enemy.
I've been threatened with death, with kidnapping, many criminal cases opened up against me in Russia. I've been sentenced to 18 years in prison in absentia. The Russians would like to kill me, but they like to kill me in a way that doesn't have repercussions for Vladimir Putin and for his regime. And so they have to come up with a way of killing me that doesn't go back to them. And so far they haven't come up with that way of killing me. I'm sure they're thinking about it. I'm sure they're discussing it. And I have to try to figure out how to prevent them from doing that.
William Browder is not the only one to fall in this battle against corruption. In 2006, a photo taken in this London hospital circled the world. Hair falling out by the handfuls, tallowed skin. Alexander Litvinenko, a former Russian Secret Service agent, is dying, eaten away from the inside. His wife, Marina, convinced the attending personnel and the English police that the causes of this sudden, unexplained illness must be sought out.
Когда Саша лежал в госпитале, мы говорили: пожалуйста, проверьте его на отравление. Доктора на нас смотрели как на сумасшедших, потому что они никак не понимали, как человек вообще попал в госпиталь с признаками пищевого отравления, а говорит, что его пытались отравить и убить.
The former agent of the FSB was investigating the links between the Kremlin of Putin, organized crime, and money laundering in Europe. Openly, thereby signing his own death warrant.
Сашина информированность, конечно, она была малоприятна Путину. То, что Саша владел той информацией, которой он был готов поделиться. То есть он не был человеком, который мог бы просто согласиться с этим и молчать. И, видимо, Путин это понял.
On the 23rd of November 2006, after 3 weeks of agony, Alexander Litvinenko died. His wife took the case before the courts. The conclusions of the investigation were categorical. Alexander Litvinenko was the victim of a murder, poisoned with polonium-210, a metal 400 times more radioactive than uranium, and that only a nuclear reactor could produce.
Был использован радиоактивный материал. То количество следов полония, которые обнаружили в Лондоне, это было беспрецедентно. Значит, говорится о том, что это был уже акт государственного терроризма. И нужно понять вообще, кто допустил, что радиоактивный материал был доставлен в Лондон, использован, кто дал на это разрешение. И вот это уже серьезная часть вопроса. Кто несет за это ответственность и кто должен понести наказание?
Marina Litvinenko has no doubts about the identity of the backers. She uses the Scotland Yard's investigation to point fingers at Vladimir Putin and the head of the Secret Service, Nikolai Patrushev.
Но когда касается вопроса Патрушева и Путина, то здесь существует слово такое «probably». А это очень четко юридический термин, который говорит о том, что это преступление не могло произойти без них.
Vladimir Putin has never been officially accused. But the investigation went all the way up to 2 former members of the Russian Secret Service who are living peacefully in Russia today, protected by power, as if crime were a routine weapon of the system.
Russian state has become a structure of corruption. I would say yes. And in order to defend against anyone criticizing the corruption or trying to uncover corruption, they will go to great lengths to silence these people, unfortunately. That is a fact of life today.
We felt this threatening atmosphere several times during the course of our investigation. Like this call from an agent of the FSB, the Russian Secret Service, trying to dissuade us from pursuing our inquiries.
Где-то, значит, Путин, значит, Петербург, говорит, не нашел этой статьи ничего. Все, где я с ним пересекался, было абсолютно чисто, лишено такой коррупции.
США, там много всего.
Но мне, честно говоря, очень обидно, что нашли. Я не понимаю, вот что завтра будет опубликовано?
Another person also contacted us. It was the henchman of an industrialist linked to the Kremlin on whom we investigated. He was insistent about meeting us. Equipped with a hidden camera, we planned to meet him in a cafe in downtown Moscow.
Здравствуйте. Никола, всем приятно. Точно, давайте так. Во-первых, мы договоримся, что я вас не цитирую, вы меня не цитируете. Это совершенно однозначно. Потому что я никто, и, соответственно, это понятно. Значит,
We begin by asking him about his work.
вам-то зачем это вообще все, я не понимаю.
Зачем это нам? Мы журналисты.
Какие журналисты? Если вы будете журналисты, вы бы что-нибудь другое написали. Нет. Дело в том, что я еще говорю, единственный момент, то, что вы пишете, не похоже на журналистское расследование. Мне просто это само по себе было интересно, за какие деньги, какой смысл столь симпатичной и находящейся за рубежом девушки.
The man starts to change his tone. He becomes threatening.
И здесь вопрос совершенно не угроза, а вопрос, знаете, есть такой момент под названием разговор. Ну, когда делаются такого рода дела, как мы знаем, да, там же следствие дошло до каких-то вещей, что сначала, значит, убили тех, кто убил, потом убили тех, кто убил, тех, кто убил и так далее. То есть это операция такая многослойная.
Since our meeting, he has not contacted us again. Widespread accusations of corruption, links with the mafia, assassinations. How much longer can Putin's system last? Will he one day have to answer for it? Today, the secret of his survival is to stay in power.
He is thinking of his own survival and the survival of his friends. on a daily basis. And he will do what is necessary today to survive the next day. And that's the Russia we are facing, and that's why it makes it so difficult for us to understand what goes on.
Historically, I think Putin already is on the way out. The question is how long he will be able to cling to power, and many people would demand that he's brought to justice.
Putin is so scared of not being president of Russia because he understands that I will and many other people who are victims of other crimes will come after him for his involvement in those crimes.
With his system, even Vladimir Putin himself would be sentenced to stay in power to protect himself. At the moment, it would appear that he has no potential known replacement.